have gotten y'all out on the frostiest morning that we've had so far. I don't know how many of y'all had to pull water in your windshield like I did. But thank y'all for being here, Wendy, and it's 8 o'clock, so let's come on and get started. This is the Department of Mental Health, and this is Wendy Bailey. And Wendy, you can introduce anybody that you want to introduce that may be with your, besides your cohort here.
That's right. So Kelly Breland, he's our Chief Financial Officer. And then we have some team members back there. We have our Deputy Director for Behavioral Health Services and our Deputy Director for IDD Services too.
And before Wendy gets started, I just want to say quickly that I have seen such dramatic improvements in mental health since Wendy Bailey's been the executive director. I've been here quite a long time, and the positive changes that I've seen, I couldn't be more happy about. So just wanted to thank you and tell you that it is not unnoticed.
We appreciate that. We've got a really great team all across the state. Okay. Well, good morning, and thank y'all for allowing me to be here on this very cold morning. As you said, I did not have to pour water on my windshield, thankfully, but we appreciate the opportunity to present our FY27 budget. And you've got two handouts from us. One is a PowerPoint presentation I'll run through, and then the other is just a more condensed version of what our request is. But I always like to start off just really giving an overview of what our agency is responsible for, which I know most of you all know that, but we have more than 600 grants that we administer for providers across the state, totaling close to about $140 million when we look at the ARPA dollars as well. We have 11 community mental health centers that are part of county government that provide services throughout the state. And then we have state-operated programs as well for mental health, substance use, and IDD. On any given day, we have about 1,200 people at our IDD programs and the community homes that we operate. Intellectual and developmental disabilities. Yes, sir. Y'all stop me at any time when I throw out acronyms because we've got a lot of... We have a little acronym cheat sheet for elbow. And then we have about 950 people on any given day at our behavioral health programs. So those are 24/7 programs that operate in the state. So to move forward, to jump into the meat of things with the actual budget request, you can see in the chart that we are requesting $291,247,156 in general funds, are $33.4 million more from the current fiscal year that we are currently in. We are requesting $453,083,201 in spending authority, are the permission to spend funds that we collect for operations, specifically for our IDD regional programs and the IDDD home and community-based waiver. So you can see a breakdown of the bullets, and this will break down exactly how that $33.4 million is requested for. The first is concerning the IDDD waiver. You can see there's $5.8 million, and that is to enroll 250 people on the IDDD home and community-based waiver. This is a waiver that is a joint partnership between us and the Division of Medicaid, and it provides individualized supports for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities so they can live in their home and local communities and not in an institution. Currently, that's exactly, thank you. So currently we have 2,965 people who are receiving supports through the waiver, and we have 2,600 on the planning list. Now, about a third of those are receiving services through like the 1915I, which is another waiver program, or they may be in an institution or a nursing home. So that's about a third that are still receiving some type of service. And then there's a lot of people over the last several years, we've done a lot of education to encourage people to go ahead and get on the planning list because it's a planning list. So there's a lot of people who don't necessarily may need the services right today if you call them. But we have 2,600 on the planning list. So that part of the request is to take 250 people from the planning list and enroll them into the waiver to begin receiving those services. There is also, as you can see, $1.1 million for a rate increase that we anticipate in FY27. So that's where you have the total of 5.8 for the waiver. There is $6.3 million increase for operational shortfalls at the state-operated 24/7 program locations. And I think I mentioned this last year when we had our budget hearing, but at our IDD regional programs specifically, intellectual and developmental disabilities and the ICF, highest level of care for those individuals, there had been a significant focus on deinstitutionalization. So the individuals who remain on our campus are those with the highest level of need. And we've seen changes in the clients that we're serving now. For example, about 10 years ago, 48% of our clients were over the age of 45. Now 62% are. We've had a 40% increase in the number of individuals on our campuses that are over the age of 66. Our number of severe and profound functioning levels have increased from 72% of the people that we're serving to 83% of the people that we're serving. We're serving 11% more with autism and 9% more who are non-mobile. So our clients on our campuses are aging and needing higher levels of care and more often one-on-ones, and they just have more severe and profound needs. So I say that to say many times you have one-on-one, you have one staff with one client. So that does increase staffing levels and staffing needs. Again, these are 24/7 programs, so we run 3 shifts, and a lot of times it's much more difficult to get people to work on the B and the C shift as well. And you'll see some of that in our personnel request as well. And it's just, and I mentioned this, I know last year too, just like you've seen an increase in your cost for your living expenses at your home, it's the same in a 24/7 healthcare situation too. So we have 11 program locations across the state, and that's behavioral health and intellectual and developmental disabilities. Then we have a part of the request, as you know, the legislature was very gracious to provide ARPA funds, and those funds will run out in October. And we looked closely at the programs that have been funded with those dollars, and you can see a $4.2 million to replace a portion of those funds. We looked at the programs that had high outcomes and are needed to continue, and you can see with that specifically, it is the 988 call center funding. That's the 3-digit 24/7 crisis line. It's to continue 2 peer respite sites, 15 of the court liaisons that have been employed at the community mental health centers, some intensive community support services for children and youth at a few of the community mental health centers, and adolescent offender programs. We can give you some more details on that, but those are the ones that we really want to see continue with the ARPA funds. Then you can see there's $4 million for personal services. This is for salary adjustments for going back to some of those B and C shifts where we have to do shift differential. So if you're willing to work those shifts, a 10% or 15% increase. Looking at, we did something different this year with our programs. Those 11 programs that the state operates that are 24/7. We asked the program directors to tell us, what are your top 3 positions that you have difficult recruiting individuals or retaining them? And then we did a 3% salary increase request for those 3 top positions at each program. The majority of the programs said support care professionals, or what we used to call direct care workers. And the legislature and the state personnel board have been so helpful over the last several years to get those salaries increased. If we go back and look 5 years ago, the average was about 23,000. We're now at the average of about 29,000. So we've done significant increases for support care professionals, but it's still difficult to recruit. We're still competing with the fast food industry for our direct care workers. Also, nursing staff, while we've done increases with the nursing, at the same time we've done it, other entities like the VA and UMMC and other hospitals have too. So it's just a constant thing that we have to be looking at is the recruitment and the retainment of the staff. So this does that targeted salary adjustment for those 3 positions at each program that are struggling the most. Then it also includes the longevity increases based on the years of service with the program or with the agency as well. We have a $2.5 million increase for electronic health record support and maintenance. So our state hospitals, we have a new EHR that is launching at the behavioral health programs and at the IDD regional program. So that's for EHR cost. And then 3.4 million for information technology security measures. This is not something we usually have in our budget request. But again, we have those 11 program locations across the state, and they all have to have IT and security. We have HIPAA that we have to take into consideration. And there was some new rules with ITS on security measures, and that's to be able to implement that at all of our programs across the state. And that is an estimate. Then we have $650,000 for a 16-bed Jackson County crisis stabilization unit. So as you may be aware, George and Jackson County were Region 14, and those 2 counties decided to separate. And Jackson County is now a standalone community mental health center. They have an 8-bed crisis stabilization unit. We've given funding for them for an 8-bed crisis stabilization unit. The need on the coast is for a 16-bed. They have the demand and they have the space. This is to provide the funding for them to go from an 8-bed to a 16-bed, which 16-bed is the maximum that you can have at a crisis stabilization unit. Then we have $2 million for capital asset needs. This is also something that we don't typically put in our budget request. It's in the bond bill, but we didn't have a bond bill last year, so we wanted to include this just to bring it into priority. This is for some very specific needs. It is for a generator replacement at North Mississippi State Hospital in Tupelo. That is the psychiatric hospital. The generator is on its last leg, and when we have our next joint commission, it's going to be cited. We've got issues with the generator. And then at North Mississippi State Hospital, that's North Mississippi State Hospital, at North Mississippi Regional Center, that is located in Oxford. And then they have community homes all throughout North Mississippi for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have 6 of those community homes that need a new generator. With the ice storm right now, we've had to relocate from 2 of our community homes in Corinth where we had water pressure issues and a failing generator. So we've got 6 generators at the community homes. And then at South Mississippi State Hospital in Purvis, another acute psychiatric hospital, we have a boiler and a chiller replacement. So that is that $2 million specifically. And we have something that we don't normally include in our budget request, but the community mental health centers, again, there's 11 community mental health centers across the state. They're part of local county government, but the state provides grant funds to them. They are charged to serve into someone without the ability to pay, so they have a very large indigent population. The state provides grant funds. They can bill Medicaid. They can write for grants from the federal government too. But again, they have a very large indigent population that they're serving. So we ask them to look at their grants that the state provides and some of those grants that have not had an increase in a long time. And just like the increase at your home goes up and the increase at our programs are going up, the cost of the care for their grants are too. So this is $4.1 million to increase the cost associated with these services based on their estimates of inflation. And it's for community support services, physician services, and community living. Again, those are all with the communal health centers. Yes, sir. That's right. They have sliding scale fees. And then the last item you'll see there is the request of the restoration of general funds under the Joint Legislative Budget Committee recommendation, which is 3.9 million. The next slide you will see is just to give you a picture of how institutional care spending and communities care spending has changed. You'll see the first paragraph is 2012, and then you've got 2025. As you can see now, 58% of the funds are going to community-based services, which is what we want. Again, we only want someone to be in an institution for the highest level of care of need for the shortest amount of time possible. So we want those services in the community. Then the next slide just is our current FY26 budget. You can see how that's broken down into general funds, special funds, and how that breaks down into the different categories. The next slide is ARPA. So the legislature had provided $51 million in funding through FY27. And again, that will end the fall of this year. Right now, our total ARPA spending, or this was as a couple weeks ago, was right at 26 million, but we do anticipate spending all of the dollars that have been allocated by the end of the time for by the fall of 2026, by October. And then the $4 million that we discussed earlier is to continue some of those programs. The next slide is just to show you kind of our employees and how that has changed through the years. To also give some context to the request for the personal services and the continued operation needs at the programs. Our state-operated programs for 24/7 care has had to rely heavily on contracts, and we are trying to ensure that we have individuals who are in PINs and that we're not having to rely so heavily on those contracts, but our agency nursing contracts and some for direct care support still, we're having to use those contracts. As you know, our programs are licensed, either they're Joint Commission accredited or they're licensed through the health department. So there's certain staffing ratios that they have to meet. So it's very important that we have the staff that we need to have a safe environment for our staff that are providing the services, and most importantly for the clients and the patients that are receiving the services. And you can see how that's changed. Again, we've had a lot of support to try to move our salaries more competitive. We still have about 89 to 90% of our staff are not at market. You know, you have minimum and market and then maximum. The goal is market, and we've been moving each year as much as we can to that. That's what we want to continue to be able to do, because market is slightly more competitive. And also to just show our state employees that we value their dedication and their loyalty to providing these services to Mississippians. And then the next few slides, I won't spend a lot of time on, but I feel it's very important for you to know where the funding is going and what's being accomplished with the funding, or where there's still gaps and areas of need. So this kind of just shows you some of the impact of what the dollars that you're appropriating is doing. One in particular that I wanted to highlight is forensic services. You may notice we don't have a request for forensic services in here for the first time in several years. So the building opened and we began serving clients in that new 81-bed maximum security unit at State Hospital in June. And in 6 months, the wait list has been cut in half, which is tremendous. We had about a year wait list for somebody to be served in that location for competency restoration. We're now at about 5 months, and our goal is to get to 3 months for competency restoration. At the same time that we had a 50% decrease in our wait time, we have had a 51% increase in the number of admission orders that we're receiving. So if you build it, they will come. We're getting more admission orders now than we have in years. So we're seeing an increase in that and an increase in the evaluation. Yeah.
So you're seeing more increases. Were those people that they just weren't even referring because the wait was too long, or is it because different criteria?
I don't think it's different criteria. Some could be the weight, but I think some is also looking at, forensic services is you have committed a crime, and it is to determine if you are competent to stand trial. And then if you're not competent, you come on to the campus of state hospital and forensic services, and we try to restore you to competency to stand trial. I think a lot of times we receive a lot of orders just wanting to make sure you're competent. And we've seen those orders increase. I think that's also more awareness about the service too. Just people being more aware.
So this mostly coming through the court system.
Coming through the court system. And then a lot of it again is, I think, just more awareness, and then the wait list is going down. So the service is more readily available than it was before. We're looking into that. Our medical director is looking into the increase in the numbers.
Bluntly, are people being referred that maybe shouldn't be?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Sometimes they are.
That's what I was gonna follow up, what Senator Boyd was asking. This is maybe just a way to delay.
Yes, ma'am. It can be.
Okay, so yeah, y'all really need to look at that. So I appreciate you letting us know, because that's out of the ballpark for that large of an increase of referrals. Just because they now know that they have another avenue to try to delay. And apparently the judges are granting what the attorneys are asking on these
in
things.
here, that 51% increase.
That's
one
way
year.
too many. Okay, I appreciate that, Wendy.
We've had a 20% increase in evaluation orders too. So just, we can get y'all some more information on that as well. But
So those are the ones that come and evaluate while they're in the jail. Because, I had a case that you had to kind of help me
that's
walk through, which was a true case.
it was.
But so, but we have a mental health explosion, a problem. We do. So, I'm not saying that it's all that, but it's got to be some over referral.
We have thankfully seen a slight decrease in the number of admissions to the state hospital. It's just a slight decrease. But we've seen a decrease in the wait in jail for a state hospital admission by about 46%. And then we've seen a decrease in just the overall wait for a state hospital admission. That's down by about 36% to about 3 days on average. But we are seeing those numbers kind of tick back up too. On the community services side, you can see that people who are receiving the intensive community services, PACT, I-Court, ICSS, those intensive services for people who've had multiple readmissions, it's working. The community mental health centers provide those services, and there is 7 to 8% readmission rate for people who are receiving those services. So if you're receiving one of those intensive services in the community, the majority of the time you're able to remain in the community and not have to be readmitted, which is what you want to see. Y'all also funded court liaisons across the state. We don't have one in every county. There's some that work in multiple counties. But when an individual comes in for a civil commitment, that court liaison can work with them and their family to divert them. And there was a 48% diversion rate with those court liaisons last year. So they are working excellent in the community. Some areas are struggling with staffing and being able to hire a court liaison, but those that are working, as you can see, at 48% diversion rates, excellent. You can also see there the crisis stabilization units. There were 3,611 admissions. Those are also funded through state grant dollars and Medicaid reimbursement as well. On the next slide, just a little bit of an impact for the IDD services. There's 657 people who are served in the IDD regional campuses, and then another 514 in our community homes. Those were what I mentioned earlier, the ICF community homes. Then you've got your waiver numbers there in your planning list, and the 1,084 that are served on the 1915I Community Support Program. The next slide gives you just some updates on 988. We talked about that that's part of the ARPA funding for continuation. There were close to 18,000 calls to 988 in Mississippi last year. We've seen an increase for the last 3 years, which is good because people are becoming more aware. And the majority of the time, when you call 988, it can be addressed over the phone. Someone just needs someone to talk to. But 988 can dispatch out a mobile crisis team that's operated by the community mental health centers when needed. So we have seen an increase in that. The other great thing about that is Mississippi consistently is in the top 3 for the national in-state answer rate. So if you call 988 in Mississippi, you're getting the trained crisis counselor in Mississippi. It's not rolling to Alabama or to Georgia or to Tennessee. It's being answered here in the state, which is important because the people here in the state know the resources in the state and can get you connected.
You get one call.
There's 2 call centers. There's actually 2 call centers in the state. And then that last slide is just some of the future goals that we have for the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. The first one is just continuing to ensure timely access to a state hospital bed. Again, there's 320 state hospital beds at the 4 state hospitals for acute psychiatric. So you can only access those beds through a civil commitment. And we want those beds to be available when someone needs them, which means they need to be reserved for individuals who have that highest level of care, which means you've got to have those services in the community to prevent that institutionalization. Then increasing access to addiction treatment and prevention services. Again, looking at crisis services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Increasing access to crisis services and substance use treatment for adolescents. It's definitely a need in our state that we need to address. Continuing to look at the planning list for the IDD waiver and moving people from the planning list to receiving those services. And then another goal that we have over the next 2 years is to create 3 psychiatric emergency service locations in the state. That's not in our funding request. That's something that we had submitted for rural health transformation grant, but looking at having 3 psychiatric emergency locations in the state. So that's just a few of the goals and strategies for the next 24 months to try to continue to improve care.
Are there any questions for Wendy from the committee? Or
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here, your presentation this morning. Could you refresh my memory? How much ARPA money did you have left on hand?
So right now we have about 25 million that's remaining. Those grants though are up and going, and I mean individuals or the programs and the communal health center utilizing that.
And that'll be expended by September 30th, by the end of the.
Yes, sir. That's the plan. And it is, that 25 million is really a low number because we had some problems with the reimbursements during the first 6 months of the year. We had to do some revisions of those budgets. So those have kind of piled up a little bit. So it's really actually a little more. I just don't have the number available right now. But
Okay.
yes, we do plan for that to be used there within those grants or used at the state hospitals for staffing challenges that they have with their direct care.
Okay, all right.
And nursing.
And I'll just make a comment as a recovering criminal defense attorney. The referrals are increasing more often than not because of the drug use and so forth. The defense attorney has to have a good faith basis for making that request. And more often than not, the DA's office is agreeing to it as well. So it's not surprising the referrals have increased and so forth. My last question, the Jackson County, the 650,000, was that a request by Jackson County?
Yes, they,
Okay.
from the beginning, when they were looking at becoming a community mental health center on their
Yeah.
own, they wanted
Yeah.
to get.
And I'll clarify, George County was happy with the relationship. They were sued to dissolve it. And only at the end did they come to an agreement. So,
Right.
and Jackson County made representations to the court and everybody that they could be fiscally reliable and stand alone. So it seems kind of hypocritical now that they're coming to you and us and saying, hey, we need some help funding this.
Well, I will say this about, just in a neutral position. Crisis stabilization units do accept admissions outside of the county. So when those 16 beds open,
Yeah.
they should not only be serving individuals in Jackson County.
They should not be.
Yes.
But yeah, I understand that. And it's needed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not needed.
I know.
But I don't think George County's come to you, now that they're standing alone asking you for any money.
Have a request in here.
Well, maybe I should ask them to give you a request. Okay. Thank you, Chair, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Anyone else have a question? Senator Rhodes?
Yeah, yesterday, in another committee meeting, you talked about the funding of, with y'all that passes through to community mental health centers. Will you go through those numbers just again very quickly of how much y'all fund the community mental health centers and then what the local county portion is as well?
Okay. So county contributions are based on millage. And Kelly, jump in here at any point. County contributions are based on millage, and that is around $9 to $10 million
For the entire
for the
state?
entire state from county contributions that go to the community mental health centers.
And how many counties do we have right now that are not meeting the minimum threshold that they should meet?
Oh, no.
They've all
None.
gone to, they've all,
There's a few that go above.
yes,
Yes.
yes. I knew that as of last
Mhm.
year, there were a couple that were not. So everybody's doing that now.
Senator Boyd, we have in our appropriation bill, we don't fund them that grant money unless they.
We will
just-
stop the grants.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. So
Is that how y'all got them to fully fund this?
and we had some conversations about funding versus,
Oh, in kind.
In
So there's a
kind.
couple of counties that do in kind. It's maybe $15,000 or $20,000, but
Mhm.
I've tried to persuade them that that should probably be cash because I'm not a real estate person. I don't know how much they're getting in these. I don't know how
Mhm.
much to value these other things at. They're just thinking that's in kind rent for that time. But they end up having a couple counties that have in kind. So we've allowed that, but it's a very small amount.
Okay, thank y'all for working on that because that's been a persistent problem. So, all right, I interrupted. you.
No, no, you're
Sorry.
good. You're good. So, in the funding, we have got, for subrecipient grants, they receive right at about $85 million. This was in FY 25. They receive about $85 million, in subrecipient grants, those 11 community mental health centers. If you look at, specifically state funds, they receive of the grants that the Department of Mental Health issues that are state general funds, they receive right at about 89 to 90% of those. And then we also have federal funds that we receive that then they receive a portion of as well. So it's right at about 85, 87 million.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Senator Dupree?
Thank you, Senator. So those counties that actually participate, how do you determine their rate of participation?
Their millage, that
They,
how much they have to.
they determine the millage. And how do you determine what they actually give? And what you give determines what the millage rate, I mean,
There's no correlation.
Right.
there's no correlation.
Senator. No, sir. So the piece of them getting local county contribution,
Mhm.
that's in the appropriation bill based on 1982 and 1984. I won't be able to recite it, but it's something that was 1982 or 1984 because that's when they reassess property values, I believe. So that's what that number's based on.
The assess evaluation.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with the grants. The grants are more of, I'll say right now, and we're trying to change some of this and shift it based on more of a measured approach on metrics than a historical development, which is what it is now.
Yeah.
So it's basically over history, here's the funding that's gone where, and that's somewhat with some shifts that have happened. But for the most part, that's more of a historical carry forward in how those services.
Okay, because you look at the millage rate, in some counties based on the millage rate and other ones, some are more, they're able to participate at a higher level than some of the other ones based on the millage rate.
We also have the issue of, DeSoto County
Yeah,
was a small county at
Yeah.
the time, relative at least. Washington County was a large county. Greenville was one of the largest cities in the state in the 1980s, I think. So there's a lot of discrepancy between that too, because that's older, and we've talked about trying to update that.
I think if you update this, you'll find that yeah, anyway, you know what I mean?
And you do have some counties that give above what their millage is. Harrison County gives several million more than what's required of them. And a lot of that is, the community mental health centers have a board of commissioners that are appointed by the board of supervisors. So how active and involved and requesting before their board of supervisors for additional funding, all that comes into play. I do want to say one thing also about the grants with the community mental health centers. They're for specific services. So it's not like there's $87 million or $84 million in grants that we give and you can use them for whatever purposes to run the community mental health center. They're for specific purposes. So that has increased over the last several years because of the DOJ litigation too. You now have PAC teams funded and I-Court teams and crisis stabilization units, but those grants are for those specific services.
Just for a frame of reference, looking at the list of counties, some contribute well over 100,000. Quite a number is less than 20,000. So it's not a drop in the bucket for some of these counties, to fund this. Something that I've looked at for many years is trying to give the counties a portion of their sales tax back, like the cities get, and, maybe prescribe how they spend it. I think if we were to update, of course, we would transfer the funds from the state to the counties, but in my opinion, they're collecting it, they deserve it anyway. But we could prescribe how they spend it, and a portion of that could be for upping that reassessment, to some degree. So that's just a funding stream that I have thought about in the past. Anyone else? Appreciate all that you do. Can I get a motion? Rise and report, because the commission is not coming, they're sick. So, yeah. So y'all are cut loose early.